Welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, as well as Fractured Colony, which is the reason why I am here today. Because right back behind me here, this is the most recent set of Fractured Colony, and it just went live on Kickstarter, which you can find the link for that down in the description of the video. I literally just launched it about 5 minutes before I went ahead and hit live here, so I imagine there's probably no backers at the moment, which is all right because, like I said, it just went live. And I had planned to do this live stream to coincide with the launch for no particular reason, and nothing to do with the fact that the last video talking about, I don't have it sitting around here, the last video doing a classic game review of Castle Ravenloft, you know, it kind of sucked, the video. It's currently on track to be the worst video in the past 3 years that was not a Christmas special, which is terrible performance. But anyway, let me jump over here to Blender because that is what I am working on today. In fact, since this set is already live and ready to basically be backed over on Kickstarter, I'm starting to work on what is going to be the third set. So I'm definitely thinking a little bit ahead. So what you're seeing here is not going to be part of this Kickstarter. It's going to be hopefully be part of a new set at some point in the not too distant future. And today I am working on a piece that is inspired by one of the, I guess, probably one of the most influential video games that I ever played back in the day. In fact, a lot of Fractured Colony. Let me grab some of the guys over here. So this is the new Pitbull main battle tank, which is one of the things that are available in the Kickstarter. And up here we have the Avalon self-powered artillery. And this particular whole franchise, sitting up here some of the other ones, a lot of shameless self-promotion going on. But this particular franchise that I created goes back to a silly card game I created as a kid, and that silly card game was based very heavily on the original Command and Conquer games. And because of that, I've always had a bit of a interest, or not an interest, I've always really liked the SAM site that Nod had. So I'm gonna make, obviously not copy that exactly, but I'm trying to create a bit of a surface-to-air missile site for the next set of Fractured Colony that kind of gets a little bit of that vibes, but I'm introducing some ideas that hopefully would make it more resilient against, say, long-range drone attacks as well as long-range missiles, because those things are now kind of a thing when it comes to modern combat. Up here, this is pretty much some of the sketches that I've worked out for the particular structure. I've got, this is the above view where I've got kind of the base of it. These little things here, this thing looks like a Mandalorian helmet. It's not. It's like one of the anti-drone, anti-missile defense units. And then they've got, whoops, a doodle. The cannons here for the anti-drone defense things. Here's some of the sketches for the missile launchers. And then over here we got some more mechanical stuff. And I make notes to myself kind of explaining why I do certain things. That way when I get around to this modeling process, I know why I designed certain features into the miniature. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start with this whole process. Now, when I do a kind of a concept art sketch like this, obviously it's not something where I can undo that, please, what I just do. It's not something, okay, let me just get this, okay, let me get that operation done. It's not designed to be something where I can just build right on top of the miniature, so it's not like this thing's drawn to scale or anything where I can just kind of quickly build it. It's more of just something so I can kind of get the idea as to what I'm going for, and I'll make all my adjustments here kind of on the fly inside Blender. And also, because most of these vehicles or structures are symmetrical left to right, I just start by using a mirror modifier. That way anything I do on the right side over here is going to be copied over to the left. And it just makes my life a whole lot easier. So I'm just going to start here now by kind of laying out the basic shape of this base of this surface-to-air missile site and kind of imagining how it would look. Something like that. That could work. So there's a base layer to this thing. Then I've got kind of like some elevated details. And the part that's very much a very clear kind of reference back to the days of Command and Conquer are these doors that open up and the thing pops out. And that's kind of the idea that I'm going for, because I always love that mechanism. So that is definitely sort of like the visual style of this one that I'm going for. And then sitting down here in the front where there's these two little hexagon pods are going to be additional defensive weapons that are designed to shoot down and engage any incoming long-range drones as well as long-range missiles. So they're kind of like, what is it called? Is it the CWIS system? Did I get that right? It's like the phalanx. There's a couple of them. You see them on like the aircraft carriers have them for engaging long-range targets, those kind of things. That's kind of how I imagine they would look. So there's going to be some of that vibes going to it. The fact that the one sketch down here looks like a Mandalorian helmet is a bit of a coincidence. That was not me trying to go for that. I'm like, oh, make sure it doesn't actually look like that. Yeah, don't make your stuff look like Star Wars things. That won't end well for anybody. Okay, so that is that little piece right there. Let me see. So there's like these second little steps. So the idea that I've got here is these little detail pieces sit over the actual kind of door frame. So I should build the door frame next. And then based on that, I can go ahead and build up the details on either side of that. So a lot of these initial steps are really just add cube after cube after cube and reshape things. There's really not, it's fairly a pretty simple starting point. And you can do a whole lot with these kind of almost like more mechanical sci-fi military type vehicles. You can do a lot with just taking basic cubes and sticking them on top of each other and resulting in something that looks pretty good without a whole lot of effort or a whole lot of even advanced blender skill, which is a good thing. Come on, there we go. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to have to do. Let me make this guy to be the size of the doors when they're open, and I will do some Boolean operations here. Because let's see, a little bit smaller. Yeah, that's kind of like how I imagine things would be. And I want to make this piece, scale it up so that it cuts almost all the way through the base. Not all the way, because I want to be able to have a spot for you to go ahead and eventually attach the actual missile launcher in a moment. Let's call this guy down here the SAM base, and this guy's going to be the let's do this is the bay door opening. So this guy right here is going to be cutting out where the bay doors are going to be, or at least basically the maximum opening of the bay doors. Alrighty, for that then we need one more Boolean operation or modifier. Okay, so let's do, and we're gonna go with the bay door opening. And I'll move this one up first. Let's see. Geez, is it giving me the fits? I'm like, but the problem is, the Boolean operation's already going a bit screwy, probably because of some of the mirroring operations. Let's do this. Let me swap some things around here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So let me apply this mirror operation, because the bulk of what I need to do for that is done. At least I hope it's done. We'll find out in a moment. Let me do the same thing for the bay door opening. Now I can go ahead and apply the Boolean operation. And if I kind of temporarily hide that, there we go. So now I've got a cutout for where it's going to be the maximum size of the bay doors. Okay, let me bring that bay door opening back up. Yeah, let me actually just take this guy now that I'm done with it as like a thing for sculpting stuff. And we're going to turn, sorry, a thing for Boolean operations to cut open the thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn this into actually one of the bay doors. So let's make this guy that looks about right. So what I need to do now, I am gonna delete. Actually, no, let me think about this for a moment. Because I need to do a bit of a zigzag pattern here. What I can do is I can take these two guys, and they're now equally spaced apart. And let's see. So let me think now. I want to create some kind of zigzag bay doors. So I go back to wireframe mode. The idea is you got these little doors that kind of like zigzag apart and they meet together. What I can do is add a bunch of these things. I'm kind of in my head here. Let me think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can do that, but I want to make, if I'm going to do that many, I want to make these two pieces right here be a little bit closer together. Because I'm just kind of figuring out in my head, by using the radial cut feature, I can kind of get essentially a bit of a grid spacing going here. So let's do 1, 2, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That would work. Okay, I'm going to go with that. All right. So now I am going to go through here, and I can delete those vertices, and now I just got like a gap in the middle that's really ugly, nasty, and needs to be fixed up. And to do that, let's go there, there. I create a face like that. I guess I didn't need the bottom thing, did I? I did things out of order, which is fine. It just, sometimes I do that. Okay, so let's create another face there. And now I'm going to keep building these little zigzag things along here. Okay, so that's going to become one of the doors. So let me grab those things. Let's see, deselect some of these vertices so that I only have the vertices that make up the one side of the door. And I can actually, let me duplicate them and then just make them their own object. And let's call this guy bay door. Oh, I gotta rotate this thing around in my head. I'm looking at it from the front, and so baydoor.l, we'll get to that in a moment. So that's actually, I call that the left one because for whatever reason, my convention is I kind of assume left or right when you're standing behind a miniature, which right now I'm kind of looking at it from the front. But okay, so there's one bay door right there. I'm gonna hide, let me hide that one. I said hide. Darn it. There we go. So let me now create the second bay door. And then I can then make them actually solid 3D objects. So that's a face. So I'm basically doing a reverse process of what I just did. And then I will be able to move these doors apart. So they're going to be, by default, they're going to be in an open state for the miniature, because the idea is you're going to be having the missile site in the middle already glued down, or, you know, probably maybe get clever and like magnetize it or something. Or possibly, as a stretch goal, I'll give you an option to magnetize it. For stretch goals, it's nice to have like some easily kind of thought of simple modifications to your miniatures to have them ready to go, and that could be one of them. Okay, let me select the parts that then make up bay door number 2. Okay, let's see here. So that guy is not it. Oh. That's not one, that's not one, that's also not one. Did I royally screw this up already? I might have. I'll fix that in a minute. I think I might have just created a whole bunch of non-manifold vertices by mistake. Oops. So anyway, let's just select this again. And I'll clean up my mess in a moment. So I don't need that one, don't need that one, don't need that one, don't need that one. Yeah, I messed some things up with the other bay door. So let me just fix this guy quickly and I'll show you what I screwed up. I clearly wasn't paying attention when I was selecting some of the vertices. Okay, so that one's good to go. So this is bay door right. And let me just kind of drag this one out of the way, and then I will show you what I managed to screw up with the other one. So let's see here. Let's hide that guy and bring back bay door left. Oh. Okay. I renamed the wrong object too. Boy, I'm really off to a rough start. So this is actually just bay door opening. So this here is supposed to be bay door left. And what I did when I was creating these little zigzag things, I didn't select the right set of vertices to create the faces. And in the process, if you're ever familiar with 3D printing, you get the whole non-manifold business. That's what I just did. So if I go to edit some vertices here, So this guy right here, this vertex I just selected, it should be part of this little triangle bit here. Let me go to solid mode. If I hit grab Z, okay, that one's correct, sorry. This one here. So you see how if I move it vertically, it kind of detaches from the line that forms the base of that triangle? That's a non-manifold vertice, and that will cause your 3D printer to really be very cranky and upset. And the reason that happened is when I created this triangle face right here, I didn't select this vertice as part of the face. Now, fortunately, this is a fairly easy thing to fix. I can select these two opposite vertices right here. I can go ahead, hit subdivide, which conveniently adds a new vertice in the middle of this line. And then I can take the vertice that is supposed to be there, select the new one, press M, and choose merge at last, which will merge the, merge as, okay, let me select this one first, then that one. Now if I choose merge at first, it'll merge with the first one I selected. I kind of lost track in my head which one I selected first. And now if I go ahead and move it around, you can see it's attached, and that's correct. And I bet I have to do the same thing here with both of these. So that is just one of the many examples of non-manifold vertices in Blender. I actually have a whole video on those if you're curious to know, I guess like the one last, how to fix them. Because there's, I run into at least about a half a dozen different types of those. Usually it's because of Boolean operations, though in this case it was me just totally failing at modeling. Okay, but that fixes that. All right, so now I've got the two basic shapes of the doors, but they're flat. Alrighty, so for that case, I can just go back into edit mode. Let's select everything, and I can extrude them up. I'll worry about setting the size in a minute. And then that turns the flat object into a nice three-dimensional object. Let me drop them down into the base here, and then I'll figure out what I think a good height will be. And then I'll do some more work on them. So I'm going to drop them, so they're going to be just a little, yeah, I think I can probably make, I want to make it so it's exactly at the height of the rest of the base. So right there is pretty good, which is a Z height. Do they both have the same scale value? Okay, they do. So let me take this guy's, why is he, okay. This guy's center is all the way down here, which I will, it's not, it's just, I don't know. That's what happens. That's what happens when you're manipulating stuff in edit mode. Weird things like that happen. So let me go object, set origin to center of mass, do the same thing over here. And that's going to, by setting the origin of the object, which is basically where its X, Y, and Z for these numbers are positioned, I can make it easier for me to put them in the right spot, because in theory they should be identical volume-wise, such that I can actually line them up pretty good. Okay, that looks about right. So if I zoom in, oops, the doodle, that should be correct. And then if I move it over, they should meet up just perfectly, or pretty darn close. That's good enough for what I'm trying to do, because I'm actually going to, like I said, model these in an open state. So for that, it's like, let's just drag them, I don't know, something like that. Same over here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cut off all the excess material. What would be the easiest thing to do? Let me see here. This guy's like that, right? Ideally, I'd want to merge these two different meshes into one object. It's a little bit cleaner 3D printing that way. It's not required, but even back in the old day, you see those little fuzziness right there? That could make slicers get really cranky. They're pretty good about it now, but let me do this the right way, because, you know, it's always better to do things the right way. So let's see here. Let's do that. And then I can go ahead and just chop off all these vertices. Then what I need to do is, okay, let me take all these faces here. Let's delete those faces. And we're now doing some pretty intense mesh surgery. And this is all just to get yourself better results when it comes to 3D printing things. It's not required, but it's just nice, especially when you're creating 3D models for other people to 3D print and you're not entirely sure what slicers they're going to be using, what 3D printers are going to be using. The cleaner of a mesh you can make, just going to make their lives so much easier. And this guy here is going to be part of the next Fractured Colony set. Is these guys that are back here are the ones that I just launched over on Kickstarter. You can find a link to that down in the description below, where you can get those STL files in the not too distant future. Because what I just accomplished there is now, let me go ahead. Oh, that is true. I'm like, well, shoot. Oh, hold on. I already have, okay, thank goodness. I actually had that problem solved. Let me move this guy into place and I'll show you what I was kind of thinking about in my head right there. So you need, when you're merging these vertices together, you got to line up all the different vertices, which means I need ones on the bottom too. Darn it. Okay. This piece, okay, I'll be honest with you, this piece is going to be a little bit too much of an annoyance to try to merge. I was hoping I could merge it into this other mesh, but it's really a little bit too annoying to try to do that. So, okay. So what I'm going to do then is simply, let's just drop it down a tiny bit so that it's going to be residing just a little bit below this mesh, and that will kind of solve some of the potential problems of slicers getting confused as to what to put on the top. So that's the other kind of quick and fast, dirty way to do things if you don't want to try to merge it. And the problem with trying to merge it together is you've got all these corners are pretty easy. This guy lines up there, this one goes there, and so on. But this line right here, you got all these vertices kind of making up these triangle pieces. I have to cut something similar into the bottom, and that's just, it's annoying. It can be done if you really wanted to do it, but this is good enough. So let's just slide that in like that, and then I got to do the same. There we go. Camera's back on. Okay. Well, that's awfully embarrassing. Thank you for that. Did I? So I got it's a Blackmagic camera up there, and I normally remember to plug it in. Apparently, I forgot to remember to plug it in, and when you don't plug it in, Blackmagic cameras have approximately about a 25-minute battery life. Well, at least the Pocket Cinema ones do, and yeah. That is an oops on my part. Thank you for letting me know that. I may not have catched that. Ugh. One of these days, I'll get all this stuff right. I haven't done this live streaming much in years, and I'm like, well, I charged up some batteries, not others. Okay, so anyway, back to building little bay doors right here. So I just got to move this guy so that it is also at the same Z height as this one, and therefore it's a little bit below. And then let me move it so that it's in the right spot and looks like it's pretty much fully open. Let's see here. They are a little bit different. That's about right. So there we go. Now we got the look that the doors are open, and there's one more just little bit of detail to put on top of it because, I don't know, I designed it that way. So let me add that now. And all that is just another cube that's turned into a rectangle and stuck on top for more detail. And then I'll probably chamfer some things just to get a little bit more of a cooler look going on, because chamfers are another great way to very easily add a little bit more detail to like these mechanical types of things. They just look kind of cool when you do that. Okay. For some reason it look cooler in my head when I sketch it out than when it does right now. What am I missing? Oh, okay, let me do that. Like, sometimes when I sketch these things on paper, it's like, you know, that really doesn't look as cool when I turn into a 3D model. It's usually because I'm missing something when I was sketching it out or something like that. That looks okay. I'll run with that. Let me just drop it down a little bit, and then I'll add some chamfers. All right, so when it comes to adding the chamfers, the first thing you gotta do in Blender is, so Blender's got the whole mathematical system going in the back end, how it applies various effects. And you have this thing over here that says scale. And if you scale your objects using the S key, these numbers change as all part of Blender's math. If I start applying things like the, they're bevel, not chamfers. I'm thinking woodworking, but you know, beveling, before I start playing around with some of the scale stuff, you'll get weird effects. Like for example, let me just jump in and show you. If I go ahead here and try to bevel this edge, it looks okay, so it looks kind of normal there. But sometimes you have weird things happen because of how the math works. So what you need to do is do Control A. It brings up this apply menu, choose scale. And what you'll notice is that changes these scale values over here all to 111. And all that's going to do now is that's going to kind of reset some mathematical stuff in the back end, and operations like the bevel, especially if you're doing sculpting, that definitely affects these things. Affect that. It'll make those things work a bit more normal. So let me just apply some beveling here and see how that looks. Whoops, a doodle, too much. That looks good, and I don't think it's going to break anything. Sometimes we got these kind of complex corners here, and you start applying beveling, things can start to overlap and produce, well, designs that are definitely not what I would say real. And you'll be able to, if you'll be able to tell it because you'll look at the model and see, okay, that's definitely just way wrong. So it'll look really messed up. And that definitely, those kind of things cannot be 3D printed. All right, so let me just go ahead and do that. We'll drop this on this side, whereabouts it should be. Okay, I am going to go ahead and move this entire thing around. The reason for, now that I've got a bunch of objects all kind of stuck together here, let me do this. If I now can build them around like X and Y of 0, it makes some of the math for getting all these pieces in the right spot a little bit easier. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I can just do the inverse of these numbers. So X can be then minus 1.46 dot dot dot. And then the Y should be the same value. And then the same thing for this guy. I invert the X. Keep the Y the same. And that should align everything up. Oops. What did I just do? I didn't do something right. There we go. All right, some more chamfers going around this base part here. There we go. And so those two pieces are not identical or not symmetricals of each other. So that's why copying the coordinates exactly didn't work. Same thing though, apply scale for the big base. And then I can go into edit mode and I can start applying some chamfers. I think this will work. I'm looking, there's some kind of, I have some more, a little more complex geometry from how I modeled this here, where the front of this guy, as you see, is 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. I think it'll be all right to just apply a chamfer across them, but I will find out in about 2 seconds. Yep, they're fine. Sometimes you have weird setups like that. Blender does weird things, but that's all right in this case. Cool. All right, so that is pretty much the base of what's going to be the SAM missile site that opens up, and with the actual launcher itself. I will build the little pods for the anti-drone stuff a little bit later. I want to start working on the missile launcher part because that's the coolest one. So the idea is it's going to have, I think, a total of 8 missiles. They're kind of attached to something like this. And I kind of made up some fake mechanical stuff as to how it would work based on my combat robotics knowledge, which isn't really applicable to static defenses, but hey, why not? Okay, so there's going to be a rotating platform here, but I want to build this thing first, which is kind of like the main structural component that kind of spins around, that has the assorted missiles mounted to it. Once again, we're going to take a cube and just have fun kind of modeling things by just changing some vertices around, and that'll be good enough for this type of object. So let's go there. We can add, actually, let me just, yeah, we can just do that. I just did a radial cut. And that makes that part perfectly fine. Let me make this guy a lot thinner. I think I am going to add some beveling to it. Oh, yeah, that's the thickness of this piece is actually going to be driven by the little motor back here. The idea is they got some sort of mechanism in the back that actually rotates the missile launchers up and down. So I'll figure the actual thickness of it in just a moment. But let me do the same thing. I'm going to apply the scale. We'll jump back into edit mode and apply some beveling just to get a little bit of a cooler looking design going. That will work. Okay. All right, let me rotate this guy and we'll stick him in the launcher and get a rough size for him. This entire piece, I'm thinking it'll probably, like this base here, when I get to the final size, will probably be about 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. And that's mainly being chosen because that's kind of like your maximum size you can design for. That's gets you max size. That's probably the biggest size you can design for maximum compatibility with most FDM, FFF printers. They're usually in the 8 to 10 inch range for most printers. So that is kind of like what this piece will be designed to go for. Oh boy, that's probably a little large right there. Way too large. I'll probably have to adjust also its height. The height of this piece is going to be dictated by the height of the missile launchers. So we'll deal with that in a moment. That means I probably should actually, before I do all the sizing, I should figure out what the missile launchers themselves look like because they're kind of the most important part. So, and I actually haven't designed any anti-aircraft missiles for Fractured Colony yet. The smart thing for me to do would be to actually look up like how big some of these things are. In fact, why don't I do that quickly? In fact, I'm not even that familiar with like anti-air missiles from actually like from the United States. They have the Patriot missile battery, which is a bit more intense probably than what I'm trying to go for, but maybe. Yeah, there's a Sergeant York. That was a bit of a disaster pit of a military vehicle, if I understand correctly. Let's see. So Stinger's more of like a personal thing. So I'm just looking on Wikipedia to pull out some. Sometimes you can get information on Wikipedia for military stuff. So it depends. You know, it's generally decently accurate. You're obviously not going to get classified information, but we're not trying to do that here. It's more of a, people kind of know how big certain things are, they measured it. Let's see what's this guy. Length is 41 feet for the Nike missiles. These are Cold War era missiles for engaging bomber targets. 41 feet, eh? Okay, or was that 26? Wait. Yeah, 41 feet, but those are, okay, that's, okay, so these are a little bit bigger than I probably thought about. You kind of imagine if I grab the two tanks, this is the one that's currently up in the Kickstarter here, the Pit Bull. And here's the Bracer Main Battle Tank, which I believe you should be able to, if I did things right, you should be able to get the old STL files from the previous set on this Kickstarter as well. They're both about 25 feet long in the storyline wise, 25 to 28 feet, something like that. And the miniatures themselves are in the range of a little over 6 inches, like The bracer is like 6.5, it's about 6.25, and then the pit bull is a little bit bigger. We'll say 6.5 or so. Okay. So considering that, let me just drop in an object that roughly maps out the size of the missiles, and we will see if that's actually reasonable for this gaming miniature. If it's not, I don't care. It's more of like, you know, it'd be kind of cool to make them about the right scale. Like these guys are roughly scale-wise at 32 millimeter scale, about what you'd expect for a main battle tank. They're kind of similar in size to the Abrams. I don't know about this guy. This guy was intended to be a bit more of a T-14 Armada-ish look, but not really. The turret doesn't look anything like it. So, you know, in my head it made sense. All right, so let me drop in a cylinder here that would be approximately, I guess 41 feet is huge. Because if 6 inches is about 25, 26 feet, that's way too big. Okay, so we're just going to scale them down to whatever I think would look reasonable for my game. Okay, so scrap reality in this case. Yeah. They have some sort of super fuel in them that burns better, and that's why they're smaller, longer range, and better explosive payload, because it's science fiction, and why not? And if you are watching live, feel free to go ahead and ask some questions in the chat. If you have any questions about Blender, I can do my best to try to answer them. I've been modeling miniatures in Blender for like 15 years-ish, something like that. So let's say this guy right here, this random cylinder, roughly represents the size of one of these missiles. Oh, hold on. Scale that like that and scale that like that. It would have to be able to at least fit in this thing. Okay, we're going to make it a tiny bit smaller. So that, we're going to say, arbitrarily defines as our missile size. So let me build a launcher around that. And if you've probably seen, if you've been watching for a little bit here, a reoccurring theme is a stylized cube. It's really a fantastic way to design these kind of miniatures. Okay, so let me go ahead, and that's probably about right. So this should, in theory, be a little bit larger than the actual missile. Okay, I got a little bit of room to play with. Because in theory, this thing could be designed to essentially load, when it raises out of its bay, it could be have the missiles already tilted up a little bit, and therefore it would fit. But you know, I want to make it so if they're in this position, the thing can lower down. In theory, obviously the miniature is not going to be able to do that, but in theory, if it was a real object, it would be nice if things worked. A lot of miniatures don't actually work in reality, if you didn't know that. Space Marines in particular, and Tau Fire Warriors. In my game room where they actually have an old Fire Warrior cosplay I built years ago, and the quad pads that go on the legs, if you actually look at how the Fire Warrior miniature is designed, and especially in the artwork, how it's represented, the Tau Fire Warrior can't sit down. Yeah, so anyway, but I want to try to design my miniatures to be relatively functional, because I think it's just kind of cooler if they are. So let's call this guy let's call this guy Missile Stand-In. And I'm going to use this as a Boolean operation to go ahead and turn this guy into the missile launcher. And then we can add some details a little bit. We're going to do some chamfered edges. I probably could put a little like door in the front that pops up, kind of like Archer's got them. So you get, like on a missile, on a guy here, these little doors flap down and they open up when you're ready to fire off missiles. This guy's from the previous Kickstarter, which you can get the STL files for that with this one as well. I believe I did the add-on thing correctly. That's a relatively new feature for me. I don't believe it was available last time I did one of these Kickstarters. All right, so let's take the launcher, and we're going to go ahead with a Boolean operation, and let's cut out the missile stand-in. And that looks right. So let's go ahead, apply that. We can hide the missile. And now we've got ourselves our actual launcher. Let's do some chamfering to make it look a little bit nicer. Now, I originally intended to design this where there was two side by side, right? So if I look at my original sketch, here's the main tower that kind of holds the things, and there was two of them kind of side by side. There's probably enough room for that. I probably can get away with that. So what I'm gonna do, actually, let me just chamfer these two edges then. So you've got that kind of a thing going there. And what I can do is, let's just duplicate this guy. We'll mirror it around. And if I line it up close enough, I should be able to merge them together using some of the cleanup operations inside Blender. So let me try to overlap the vertices as close as possible. Just like that, we can join them together into one object. Go into edit mode, vertex select, and up here under mesh, we have cleanup, merge by distance. Right now I see it removed 0 vertices. If I now open up the merge by distance tab, and what I tend to do is increase this by a factor of 10. So let's do that. Still remove 0 vertices. Which, since I'm working with such a large miniature, that's not surprising. Still remove 0 vertices. Okay, so let's go up to 0.1, which would be 0.1 millimeters. Remove 0. Oh, let me do that correctly. Select everything first, and then choose mesh, cleanup, merge by distance. And now let's reduce things by 10 because it looks like a train wreck. Okay, there we go. I want to see remove 4 vertices because there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that, okay. Yeah, my mistake. Got to select things first. I swear I've been doing this 15 years. I just tend to forget some of the workflow sometimes. Okay. And the other problem you got to deal with, though, it's kind of tricky to see if I select everything, there's another face in here. So you kind of see there's a little bit of a shaded area right here that's darker than the rest. That's because there's another face, kind of like an outside face, but on the inside. This is something that also will cause slicers to choke and be very unhappy, because right now if I were to go select by trait non-manifold, you're going to see it's going to select those 4 things like that. And I know that if I go to that there's an internal face there. If I press X for delete and choose faces, it'll go ahead and delete that internal face without actually deleting any of the vertices, any of the extra data. And then therefore, if I go select non-manifold, that should, or select, yeah, by trait non-manifold. Let's do recalculate normals and try again. There we go. Recalculate normals is one of those more internal math things that tells Blender when you have a given face what the actual outside of and inside of it is. It's a weird 3D modeling concept because 3D objects are actually empty boxes, not solid objects. And that throws off 3D modeling stuff too. Someday maybe I should do a video on explaining that, but it's a bit of a, it's not a hard thing to explain, but just kind of, it's weird because it's not like normal. It's a very unintuitive thing unless you're used to working with 3D models. All right, so We've got our double launcher there for 2 of the missiles. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it and drop. There's going to be a second one that sits down below it, something like that. And then there's going to be more on the other side, but I'll worry about that later. What I've got right here is good enough just for the current modeling. At least, you know, I'll build the one side first, and then I'll go ahead and do the duplication, get it to the other side. Let's see here. I think what I will do is design the little flap. And for that, let me go back to edit mode here. I'm going to actually make a duplication of the back of the launcher. So I'm going to take these faces that are back there, duplicate them, turn them into a separate object. The reason is because that's a nice flat face of essentially what I would need to cover up this front here. Let's go with this guy. We're going to extrude it out. That looks good. Let me actually make it a little bit, oh, hold on. We'll scale it down, make it a little bit narrower. And one little fun note there is when I went to do scale Y, you can see it's kind of almost moving the mesh. The reason for that is scaling operates around the center of the object. Now, because this guy was basically a duplicate of a face and I did some stuff to make it its own object, its center is still actually the center of the object I cut it out from, which is way back here. You see a little orange dot? That's where Blender thinks the center of the object is, even though the entirety of the object is right there. So one of the things is you got object, set origin, origin to center of mass, which will move that orange dot to the center of mass, and that's going to make some operations just be a little bit easier to kind of follow along with. So scale Y, we'll do that. Apply, apply some scale, and then I'm just going to scale that face down a little bit, and that gives me a little bit of decoration for when I flip it around and move it over to the front. So you can see that would fit on there, kind of nice and perfect. And what I would do in this case is I'm just going to rotate it around. I kind of mirrored it and then just undid it, but you know, details. And it would sit up here as if it was open. And now I got to design, I can do it right now. I'll design some sort of simple hinge system right here to be able to tell that it's, you know, there's some mechanical stuff going on. It's not just like magically attached there somehow. Plus, you know, you got to glue pieces together. So what I'll probably do I'm thinking about, I try to design these miniatures to use minimal amounts of support. So it's sort of like an interesting challenge. You know, you might be able to get away with almost no support in this guy. Because I could print it with the missile tubes facing down. If the missile tubes face down, in theory you need some support material going down in there, which would be a total disaster pit from trying to remove that support material. But if you were to model this or print this guy where this side is sitting down, you'd have support material going up here, which would ruin this little detailed face. I don't know. The fact that there's just a bunch of, the fact that those pieces are way back in there, and if they get screwed up a little bit with the 3D printing with no support, I'm not sure if that would be a big issue. I'll add that to the list of things to experiment when I get around to that process. Because otherwise, you have to start gluing a lot of pieces together, like with the Archer. Each of these little doors gets glued on, which isn't hard, but you know, that's more work on whoever's ever assembling the miniature, which some people like that kind of stuff, some people don't. If I can make it easier, then I would make it easier. So if I can avoid requiring people to glue stuff together, then that would be great. All right, well, let me just add a little cylinder here as a hinge, and we can call at least this part of the model complete. I think that looks pretty good. That's a good size there. Yeah, that works. Okay, so let me just kind of scale it to fit this piece. Yep, that can work right there. So let's call this missile top hinge. And I feel that the top of the missile launcher here, the cover, needs some more detail there, but I'll worry about what that'll be later. There's obviously a lot more modeling involved with this piece than just a little bit I've got done today. I think I'll probably stick around another 10 minutes on this live stream. We'll call that good. And why don't I try to figure out then the size of this guy right here? So this is the centerpiece that kind of rotates around. I think what I'm going to do, let's scale it this way quite a bit. Well, scale it that way quite a bit more. And I have a fair bit of room to work with. Right, so I'll keep these separate objects for right now. That right there is sort of about as far to the right as that launcher can be. Let me move that one out of the way. And this guy right at the moment is in the very center of the base of the missile site, which is fine. So I kind of have a maximum practical limit of this piece like that. That's like the maximum practical limit of the width of this piece in order to get this piece in here, as well as both launchers, some extra mechanical doohickeys, and still make it actually seem like it could really rise out of these bay doors. And the height really has to be such that, because when I actually produce this as a miniature, you're going to be able to model this such that the missile launchers can be faced different directions, right? So the missile launcher can be facing up, getting ready to fire. So in theory, it's got to be tall enough such that, let's just go ahead and have that stick up, so that the missile launcher can at least properly be facing all the way vertical. So if I move that like that, I can then scale this thing up in the Z direction. There's going to be a bit of a platform in here. I'll build that later. So that is kind of like that. And if I wanted, so let's see here. Whoops a doodle. So that missile launcher would be kind of like that. So it would seem to be, well, I'm going to make a change to this guy. So what I want to do is I want to intentionally offset this guy's center of rotation so that the center of this object would be where it would rotate if this was actually a functional, mechanical, real static defense piece. Except that it actually, oh no, hold on. Something like that. So that kind of simulates its approximate like angle of rotation right there. Right? So if there's going to be a base down there, that's probably smacking into the base, and that's no good. So I need to make this piece a little bit taller, which is fine. Because you're running into the only limit you really have would be like a 3D printer limit, and once again you're looking at like 7.5 inches, which I'm not there yet, I don't think. So if I do that, Okay, so that rotation point right there is probably good enough such that this piece, you know, would not actually hit the base if it was a real like launcher type thing. Okay, so what I need to do then is move this guy up so that that is sitting in a somewhat reasonable spot. Okay, so that is kind of roughly how I'm deciding the height of the center pillar. Which means then let me take this other missile launcher and set it up in a seemingly approximate spot, something like that. I'll get its exact spot a little bit later. You know, if you could actually build, if I could print this whole thing out as one thing, it'd be kind of cool, but it's probably not too practical. Just thinking out loud, which I've kind of been doing this whole time. Okay, so one thing I wanted to have down here is there is like a motor that's going through a fancy 90-degree angle drive to control the position of these different launchers up here. So for that, let me just add another simple cylinder back there. It's going to have some more details added to it later. And I can make it, I probably should make it, there we go, just a little bit smaller than the width of this thing. And also I have to think about rotation, but I'll worry about that later. Because if this whole pillar is rotating in the base itself, then you got to think about, make sure it doesn't bump into something that it shouldn't bump into. I've changed the Avalon, which is one of the artillery pieces that's in the current Kickstarter. The turret, I actually had to change the reactive armor pattern that's on the side here because when the initial version got printed off, I would rotate the turret and it would bump into that, and it's like, well, that's no good. So sometimes you have to actually think about, I try to think about that functionality in case people want to model it weird ways, so it helps to test like, you know, rotation, stuff like that, but I'll worry about that a little bit later. This is not super important for that. Let me model that down a little bit because the reason for that is I'm going to scale another one up and we're going to make a little bit of detail right here. Once again, just adding a little bit of extra detail, just, you know, little detail because it looks kind of cool. What I probably should do is actually turn these things both into a housing. To do that, instead of making them just be cylinders, I am going to go ahead and, let's see here, we're going to delete the bottom half of the cylinder, and let me then take this guy, extrude it along the z-axis. So now what you got the cylinder, but then it just has a straight line down to the wherever the bottom's going to be. And then let me just go ahead and fill in some faces, and then now you've got a housing instead of just a cylinder. And finish up with the magic of recalculate normals. And you've got a shape that looks more like something's protecting an electric motor instead of, what happened to my camera again? Why do I not have a camera? I have a camera over here still. Let me check something here. What is going on? Am I still talking over on my live stream here? Because I got a camera in OBS, but I don't seem to see my same camera over here in, oh. Oh shoot, geez, okay. I know what I did. Okay, this is embarrassing. So I apparently had accidentally jumped back to the playback of my live stream back to where I had no camera. Everything's fine. Ugh. Yeah, I'll be doing more of these and actually getting a little bit better at it. So let me just finish up turning this guy into a housing, and then I'm going to call the stream done for tonight. So thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, of Fractured Colony, as well as the Kaladesh Universe. That's what these guys hanging around here are. These days, it's just a line of sci-fi space combat miniatures that you can order. That's over at Kaladagia.com. Yeah, good luck trying to spell that. Free tip, if you ever create a sci-fi franchise, don't make up a word. Hence why I've got Fractured Colony as a new one. People know how to spell that because it's a combination of two real words. And apparently no one was using that as far as I can tell. So, okay. That looks good enough for right now. I'm going to add some more details later. So, okay, let me just jump back to my main camera for a moment. And there we go. All right, so one last time, the Pitbull main battle tank, the Avalon self-powered artillery, and this little guy hiding right here, the Lionel class attack drone, which is like an AI-powered anti-tank missile, are all currently available on Kickstarter. You can find a link to that down in the description of this live stream / video below. And next time, I will go ahead and remember to plug in my camera so we don't have all those embarrassing things. Oh, thank goodness I have that muted because I accidentally left this thing unmuted. Okay, well, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.